Hello from Jerusalem, and welcome to Bet Avichai. Today is our second session in a series of virtual tours with tour guide Ami Braun. And today we'll be heading to Rishon Lezion, and specifically to the museum in Rishon Lezion, dealing with the revival of the Hebrew language. Ami, I think we're ready to go and learn Hebrew.
Thank you very much, Tamar. My name is Ami Braun, tour guide, and we're going to go on a fascinating virtual tour today in the Rishon Lezion Museum. But really what we're focusing on through the museum is Eliezer Ben Yehuda, the man who revived the Hebrew language. Or what does that mean to revive it? We'll get into that in a minute. But first things first, of course, I want to thank Tamar and Beit Avichai for giving me this platform to run this three-part virtual tour series of Ha'et HaChadasha, the new era in modern-day Zionism. I also want to thank the Museum of Rishon Lezion for giving us the ability to virtually tour through the museum. And I want to thank Dai Virtual Technologies for giving us the ability to run with this technology through the Rishon Lezion Museum. This is one of a couple dozen tours that Dai Virtual Tours has. Look, we started last week in Tel Aviv. Whether you're with us or not, it doesn't matter at the moment. And over there we spoke about the revival of the Jewish people over here in the land of Israel at the end of the 19th century. And in order to do this revival, we need three different key elements. We need a people, a nation, we need a land, and we need the revival of the Hebrew language. And that is a story of Eliezer Ben Yehuda. Eliezer Ben Yehuda, who are you? To answer that question, let us start making our way into the Rishon Lezion Museum. And we're going to stand in the room that is going to tell us a little bit of his story. Now, you might get a little bit dizzy at time to time as we're twisting and turning over here through the museum. I'm going to do my absolute best to try and make it a smooth ride as we virtually make our way through the museum. Eliezer Ben Yehuda, let's zoom in a little bit on his face. Here we go. And this is him in the middle, the guy with the serious face wearing a suit jacket right over there. Was born in Lithuania, classic, a very Orthodox family. His mother, Tzipora, is on the left side. Over here, Eliezer Ben Yehuda. Her husband passes away. Eliezer Ben Yehuda's father passed away when he's very, very young, and he goes to live with his uncle, who gives him a sound yeshiva education. But at a certain point, Eliezer Ben Yehuda is struck by lightning, and this lightning is called the Enlightenment movement. And as he's struck with this lightning over here, Eliezer Ben Yehuda is going to have something that will impact him and the Jewish people and the state of Israel and all, however you want to look at it, until today. And that is he gets a book on Dikduk Ivri. He receives a book on Hebrew grammar, and he's fascinated. And he starts reading books in Hebrew on Mikzoot Chulin, on things that are not connected to religious, to religion, be it Mishnah, be it Gemara, be it Talmud. Wait a minute, we're talking Europe, we're talking Lithuania, we're talking the middle of the 19th century. Eliezer Ben Yehuda is going to be born in 1858. We're now in the 1870s. Right? We don't have a state of Israel yet. We haven't even gone to what is officially known as the first Aliyah, the first wave of immigration of Jews coming to the land of Israel, the Aliyot that eventually lead to the creation of the state of Israel. Where does Hebrew come into this whole story over here? So, a lot of times we talk about Eliezer Ben Yehuda being Mechaya Safa Ivrit, the reviver of the Hebrew language. The Hebrew language never died, all right? Hebrew was still spoken throughout the generations for hundreds and, the different years, no matter where we are around the globe. It'll be taught, okay? We're going to learn a lot of times in Hebrew. You're going to have a lot of documentation and different business deals that will be written in Hebrew, but the language never evolved into a day-to-day language. And Eliezer Ben Yehuda says the following. When he's about 20 years old, we're talking 1878, 1879, he writes an article. And this is his big article, right, his big breakthrough, and it's called She'ela Nichbada, the very important or respectable question. And in this article that he calls She'ela Nichbada, the respectable question, he says, if we, the Jewish people, want to be a nation and come back to our homeland, the land of Israel, we need to revive, we need to make the Hebrew language a language that is used on a daily basis. Another article that he wrote, if we turn just a little bit to over here, and it'll say the following, it'll say, and I'm going to read it in Hebrew and then translate it into English, and we're going to be doing that a lot in this virtual tour. He says, Shnei advarim shebiladehem lo hayu haYehudim la'am haaretz ve'alashon. The two people that without them, the Jewish people are not going to be a nation, is the land and the language. And Eliezer Ben Yehuda makes it his life goal to revive Hebrew as a language that is used on a daily basis. How does he do that? How is he going to go about doing this? Well, that's what the whole virtual tour is about. Let's take a look at a little bit at his family. We can see on this picture over here that's on the top of the window, we see Eliezer Ben Yehuda with his second wife, Chemda. Okay, it's his first wife, Dvorah, who with he's going to come to the land of Israel. She's going to pass away. He's going to marry her sister, Chemda. And they're going to work together a lot regarding the Hebrew language. In addition to that, if we're talking about Eliezer Ben Yehuda, he had 6 children, but his most famous one, his most well-known, is a man who was born by the name of Ben Zion. And later he's known as Itamar. Itamar ben Avi, Itamar ben Eliezer Ben Yehuda. When does Eliezer Ben Yehuda arrive in the land of Israel? So the answer is in the year 1881. Where is he going to arrive to? If you were with us last week on our tour of Tel Aviv, we spoke about the entrance to the land of Israel in the port of Jaffa. And let us now go over there and meet Eliezer Ben Yehuda as he arrives with his first wife, Dvorah, in the port of Jaffa. And here we are. Google Earth, hello. Once again, the port of Jaffa, the entry place for many into the land of Israel, the place where many of the Jews who will start arriving to here with the coming of modern-day Zionism at the end of the 1800s. They're going to make this way through this port. Last week we met Theodore Herzl, political visionary of the land of Israel. We met David Ben-Gurion, the founding father of the state of Israel. And now we are going to meet Eliezer Ben Yehuda. He's going to come to you in 1881. That makes him, do quick math, he's 23 years old. We're a year before officially modern-day Zionism, the first Aliyah begins. We always need to choose the year. He comes the year before. He'll describe how on the ship, as he's arriving to the land of Israel, he turns to his wife Dvorah and he says to her, Kama yafa haaretz. How beautiful is the land? And Dvorah is going to answer, Kama yafa, how beautiful. And you might be saying, what's the big deal? I mean, we talk Hebrew, we're, all the time. I mean, what's the big deal? And the answer is that people simply did not speak Hebrew on a daily basis back then. Eliezer Ben Yehuda is going to say, from now on, I am only talking Hebrew, not a word of another language. When Eliezer Ben Yehuda and his wife Dvorah step off the ship, they're going to start walking around these areas over here of Yaffo, the old alleyways over here, and he's going to describe how he's going to come up to a shop owner. He's going to come up to someone who has a chariot with a horse, and he's going to start talking to them in Hebrew. And you might be asking, but wait a minute, I'm a little confused. So we don't have day-to-day Hebrew yet. We don't have all the words that Anachnu medabrim itam hayom, that we talk with them today. But he had ancient Hebrew, like biblical Hebrew, so what's he talking? So that's the whole thing. It was broken Hebrew. It was like old Hebrew and trying to think of new words as you're on the move. We'll talk later on a little bit how Eliezer Ben Yehuda, how he came up with a lot of the words, and also some of the people that weren't too happy with the way he was working. But he's making the effort. He's talking in broken Hebrew. He's talking slowly. And this over here is the very beginning. Eliezer Ben Yehuda, seeing the youngsters that are starting to make their way to the land over here, and they're making their way to here through the port of Jaffa, is going to say the following regarding the goal of having Hebrew become a language that is used on a daily basis around the land of Israel and beyond. He says like this, if you don't try a little bit at a time to speak Hebrew, when we sit in our homes, when we walk in the fields, when we shop in the markets, when we confide among friends, then we will not succeed and our hope will be lost. You, youngsters, he's talking to the young chevre, the young guys, the young men and women that are starting to immigrate to the land of Israel and starting to build it with agriculture and new towns, and we're going to meet them soon enough. He says to them, you youngsters, unite, connect, create a society that will breathe life into our language that borders within the land of our ancestors. We said a language, we said a land, okay, of course the people, these three variables that we're talking about, and here he is. Now, Eliezer Ben Yehuda, when he arrives to the land of Israel, where is he going to go live? He's going to go live in Yerushalayim. He's going to arrive in Jerusalem. In this picture that we can see over here, we can see his apartment that was on the second floor of this home, which is today in Jerusalem on a street called Ethiopia Street. He doesn't start here. He's going to actually start in the old city, in the Jewish quarter. He's going to live over there. And when he arrives in 1881, who's he going to meet? He's going to meet the members of what's called the Yishuv Hayashan, the old Yishuv. Not the new families and the youngsters that are going to start making their way really from the following year and starting to work in agriculture and buy land and build the land and be productive in trying to eventually, what will turn into the state of Israel about 50 years, close to 70 years later. He's going to meet a lot of the ultra-Orthodox families that are living over here in the land of Israel, and one of the four, what we know as the four holy cities in the land of Israel, one of them being Jerusalem. How's he going to be welcomed to Jerusalem? Well, not very well. He's seen as someone who's a little off, who's a little different. I mean, the ultra-Orthodox, they've been in Jerusalem for however long they've been there. They're speaking Arabic, they're speaking Ladino, they're speaking Yiddish. And here comes Eliezer. I mean, of course they speak Hebrew, but they speak Hebrew, be it when they're learning, they use it more for religious purposes. And here comes Eliezer Ben Yehuda, and he's trying to secularize. The word in Hebrew is chilun. He's trying to secularize the language and use it on a daily basis. Use Hebrew to go shopping, use Hebrew to go to talk about, to teach in school. No, this doesn't work. And throughout Eliezer Ben Yehuda's entire life, and he's going to live until 1922, there's going to be a tremendous amount of tension between the two sides. And by the way, actually I forgot to mention before, part of the beauty of running this virtual tour now is because the year is, of course, 2022, and we're now commemorating 100 years to Eliezer Ben Yehuda passing away. Should have said it at the beginning, but you get the idea. So we can already see a lot of the tensions that are building in Jerusalem as a result of this. So where does Eliezer? I'll even tell you more than that. If Eliezer Ben Yehuda arrives in Jerusalem in 1881, 20 years later, we're talking about 1902, they're going to bake a cake for the 10th family in Jerusalem that will decide to speak Hebrew at home. This is coming from Eliezer Ben Yehuda and his wife Dvorah, and then later Chemda. They're encouraging everybody to speak Hebrew on a daily basis. Just the 10th family in Jerusalem 20 years later? Doesn't sound very good. So where does it really, yes, work for Eliezer Ben Yehuda right at the beginning? In order to answer that question, what we're going to do is we're going to walk now to our next room. And in order to walk to our next room, we're going to leave this room that we will come back to a little bit later regarding Eliezer Ben Yehuda. And as we come into this next room over here, this is the room of Rishon Lezion. And let's stand like this. And let's take a look at these pictures over here. Look, Rishon Lezion is going to be one of the first yeshuvim, first small towns that are going to be built by immigrants from the first Aliyah. And when there are going to be 17 families that are going to arrive in Europe. And they're going to buy the land that is Rishon Lezion today. It is south of Tel Aviv, right on the coast. They're going to be led by a man whose name is Zalman David Levontin. And they're going to start working over here in Rishon Lezion. And we can see, I actually didn't stand so great. So first of all, I want to stand at this point over here. The beauty of virtual, when you're with your own 2 feet, you move around no problem. The virtual, it's like, you got to position yourself exactly. What we can see here is some of the first pictures from the town, this town of Rishon Lezion with the 17 original families that will come to over here. They're going to settle the land in Tu B'Av, on the 15th day of the Hebrew month of Av, and the summer always comes out in 1882. We see this picture over here, and if we twist and turn a little bit more, we can also see these pictures over here. Let's get just a little bit closer, and we can see some of the really first members and workers over here who are working in Rishon Lezion. When they come, they do not know what they are doing. They start working in agriculture, they plant wheat. The wheat doesn't work over here in the sand dunes of Rishon Lezion. It's not going to go well. They're going to start digging for water, digging. They cannot find water. They go to the top of a hill and they start digging for water from there. It's not going to help. You got to start from a lower area in order to try and find water. And it's only when the Baron Edmund Benjamin de Rothschild, who will come the following year, will give donations, and with his help, they'll manage to dig 48 meters, more than 150 feet deep. They're going to hit water, and Rishon Lezion is going to start to flourish. But what is the connection to Eliezer Ben Yehuda? The connection is very strong. Okay, Eliezer Ben Yehuda starts meeting these immigrants from the first Aliyah and talking to them about the importance of the Hebrew language, of using the Hebrew language on a daily basis as part of reviving the people, reviving the land over here, and they totally buy into it. And one of the more important things that they do in Rishon Lezion is they're going to create a Hebrew school. In what language are you going to teach in this? What language are you going to teach in this school? Eliezer Ben Yehuda says to them, "Telamdu be'ivrit." Teach in Hebrew, because if you teach in Hebrew, all right, and your children are learning Hebrew, your children will teach you, the parents, Hebrew once again. It'll be like a ripple effect. You throw a stone into a pond, you have the ripple effects. They'll teach you Hebrew. They'll teach eventually their children Hebrew. When you educate the youngsters, that has the biggest influence. Now, so we have teachers in the school. They want to teach the kids Hebrew, but there's no words. It's teaching Hebrew in Hebrew. How do you teach a language that you have to sort of revive it with the language that is only in the process of being revived? So a lot of times when the teachers in Rishon Lezion are looking for a word, they'll either send a message or they'll come up to Eliezer Ben Yehuda, which is why let's move one step forward like this over here. They'll come up to Yerushalayim, which is why they have pictures over here of Jerusalem next to Rishon Lezion. And they'll be hosted by Eliezer Ben Yehuda, and they'll sit, and they'll talk, and they'll try to figure out, okay, how do we use this word? How do we use that word? And then they'll go back to Rishon Lezion. For Eliezer Ben Yehuda, Rishon Lezion was a place that he enjoyed going very much, because if he wasn't necessarily always appreciated by a lot of the residents of Jerusalem, they loved him in Rishon Lezion, and because they loved his ideas of reviving and using Hebrew on a daily language, and he liked to go to Rishon Lezion a tremendous amount because of that, and he was very well respected. And what we're going to do now is, if we start talking about Rishon Lezion and Eliezer Ben Yehuda and teaching Hebrew in Hebrew, lelamed Ivrit be'Ivrit, let's go to the first class in the land of Israel where Hebrew was taught on a daily basis. And here we are. All right, if you're ever wondering where it all began from regarding teaching Hebrew in school in the land of Israel in modern times, so here you go. We have now arrived in this classroom, and this is the room itself isn't original. It's across the street. I'll show you in a little bit where the school really is when we're walking along a different point. But these are the artifacts that were brought over here. Take a look. Let's go stand literally. I love doing this. It's fun. Let's stand literally in between the where they were sitting. And as we're standing over here, between where they're sitting and the tables and the benches, that's the word that escaped my mind, benches, they're all black. And that's because the students over here wrote with ink. The ink got all over the place. It got on their clothes. They started wearing black clothes to school because it just was getting on their clothes. It got on the tables. It got on the benches over here. And as we're looking around over here, let's twist and turn a little bit. And let's see. First of all, at a song that they were that they were teaching. When you teach Hebrew back then, and when you spoke Hebrew back then, it sounded different than today. You spoke with a very Ashkenazi way of speaking, meaning the words were said in, you emphasize the beginning of the word. It's called mil'elo milrad. You emphasize the beginning of the word or the end of the word. So I'll read to you some of the words over here, and if you're used to hearing Hebrew, it'll sound funny. They would say, Abba, Kana, Lanu, Ez. For example, or Achal, Chem'a, Shata, Chalav. Today you say, Abba, Kana, Lanu, Ez. Right? My 16-year-old, she's not 16 years old. My 16-month-old daughter comes up to me always, Abba, 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 not Abba, Abba. All right? Or Achal, or you say today, Achal. The words are different, but that is how you spoke back then. I'm just trying to enter a little bit of the mindset of how they spoke back then. We can see where the teacher stood. All right, this is where he would stand, and this is where he would teach from. And if we take a look back, they're learning the map of Israel. We're talking about starting from 1880 to 1883 onward, and they're learning what the land of Israel it looks like, which is pretty cool to see. And if we want to see any teachers out there amongst you, if you want to see respect to the teacher, let's move to over here, and we can see this little podium that the teacher would stand on top of. Now, Ivrit be'Ivrit, they're teaching Hebrew with Hebrew words. It is very difficult. And as a result of that, you need books to learn from. Where are they going to get the books from? They're going to write their own books. And that is how they were going to teach. And when they would really get stuck over here from the classroom, they'd either send a letter or go to Jerusalem to sit with Eliezer Ben Yehuda, or he would come to here. He loved this place in order to learn more and more Hebrew. Look, we can take a look at the class pictures that we have over here. I mean, it's cool because you think about it. These are literally faces that are looking out at us from the dawn of history of modern Hebrew that was taught on a daily basis. If these people knew the impact that they had, this ripple effect on Israeli society, it'd be unbelievable. Because look, if we take a look at the PowerPoint presentation, Eliezer Ben Yehuda said the following regarding the ripple effect. The Hebrew language will go from the synagogue to the Beit Midrash, and from the Beit Midrash to the school. And from the school, it will go to the homes and rooms, and it will become a live language, a safa chaya. As a tour guide, there are many, many times that I have the privilege of being part of a bar or bat mitzvah family trip to Israel. And the bar bat mitzvah boy or girl will read from the Torah, and you're reading from words that were written over 2,000 years ago. It were used, you could read them over 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. And without getting into I'm sitting over here as a tour guide and going to get into talking about the letters. We're not going to do that over here. But you're reading that, and then after reading from the Torah scroll from 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, you'll then turn around and you'll start talking in modern day Hebrew. This is the connection over here from the ancient Hebrew of the ancient Torah scrolls, from the scrolls that we'll read from 1,000 years ago from the Cairo Geniza to the modern day Hebrew. These are the faces that are making this connection over here. Now, was it hard for them to learn Hebrew? I can only assume it was. But if we jump forward to today, we can look at this beautiful song over here that was written by Dan Almagor, all right? And after being written by Dan Almagor, the song being written by Dan Almagor is a conversation between two Olim Chadashim, two new immigrants, not from Herzliya back in the 1880s, but rather from today. New immigrants are going to move to the land of Israel. You'll go to Ulpan, and over there you'll learn Hebrew. And this song is a conversation between two of these Olim saying how difficult it is. It's between a man and a woman, so it'll get a little bit romantic. And let's try to read through it, and then we'll listen to this song. So the man is turning to the woman. He's saying, what time is it? But he doesn't know to say, what time is it? Mashai says, how much hour, please? Instead of, nu ole. Instead of saying, I'm a nu ole, what time is it? How much hour, please? Nu ole. And then he wants to say, I'm learning Hebrew. I don't know how to talk yet, so much it's hard. Ivrit, learning, not yet know, is very hard. Right? He is speaking in broken Hebrew. And the female, the woman, is going to answer, mitul pan, to learn a little time. Yochevet's teacher's class. She says, I'm also in Ulpan. I'm learning for a little bit. I'm in teacher Yochevet's class. And this is going on and on, back and forth. And then there's the chorus. And the chorus on the bottom says, Oi, Oi vei. Oi, Ivrit, hard language. Also confusing, but you can talk slow. I with you, also me with you. See, there's also the beginning of the romantic part. I with you, also me. I'm with you and you're with me. But he gets the words wrong because he's still learning Hebrew. And then in the middle of the second, the right side, it says like this. He's already sort of making a move. You have misses? All right? And basically say, are you married? Not at all. You have man? I think we get the idea. I know and have. Very hard to get along here. A person alone. If person has friend, life much nicer. We have a little romance over here. Let's listen to Yossi Banai and Rivka Michaeli singing the song.
יש פה בארץ שבועיים, יש חדש עולה. עברית ללמוד, עוד לא לדעת, יש הרבה קשה.
גם כן אני אולפן, ללמוד כיצד זה מה. אני כיתה מורה יוכבת.
כמה זמן ללמוד.
אולפן עקיבא מתי בבוקר 4 שעות.
עברית קשה שפה, גם שפה מתבלבלת, אבל אפשר לדבר לאט.
אני עם אתה,
גם כן אני עם את.
אני עם אתה,
גם כן אני עם את.
I have to tell you that as I was listening to this again, I had a memory. I made Aliyah with my family back in 1983. I was 5 years old. I didn't know Hebrew. I knew Abba, Ima, Ken, Lo, means mom, dad, yes and no, and that's about it. And I went to preschool, whatever it was, a summer school before kindergarten. And I came back home, and I said to my parents, I am not willing to speak that language, I want to go back home to the United States. 40 years later, I'm still here. I don't remember the story, but my parents love telling that story about me. But let's move along. What we're going to do now is we're going to go now to what's called the furniture room. And we are now going to leave the room of Rishon Lezion. And let's go talk a little bit about stories. Okay, we can just imagine if Eliezer Ben Yehuda decides that it's his life goal, of course, for Hebrew to become a daily spoken modern language, and he refuses in his home to speak any other language, just imagine, and it's still a safa b'hitavut, as we're saying in Hebrew, a language that is being recreated. There's going to be some pretty interesting stories. So now in the Rishon Lezion Museum, we are standing inside what's called the furniture room. We can see the furniture from Eliezer Ben Yehuda's home in Yerushalayim. We saw the picture of his home before. We'll just do a quick twirl of 360 to take a look at it, and then we're going to stop. I'm not going to move too much because it's not always the most pleasant. You get a little bit dizzy. Let's stop over here. Well, there's a lot of different stories. Eliezer Ben Yehuda was kanai lasafa ha'ivrit. I think the exact translation would be jealous for the Hebrew language, meaning do not speak another language in the house. And this will lead to situations, for example, as a guest once came over to the house, and Eliezer Ben Yehuda went into the kitchen, and he was going to ask his wife, I don't know if his first wife or second wife, to do something in the kitchen, and he said to her, please put the kacha on the kacha, meaning please put the whatchamacallit on the whatchamacallit with the whatchamacallit. Put the kacha on the kacha with the kacha, because he was missing words for it. There was another time when their son, Ben Sion, later known as Itamar, was born, that there was a scorpion crawling over in his direction, and Eliezer Ben Yehuda's wife, Dvorah, gets very scared, and there wasn't a word for scorpion, which, by the way, today in Hebrew is akrav. Akrav didn't exist yet. So, I mean, there's a scorpion going to her son. She doesn't have time to start saying, so she goes, scorpion, scorpion, and Eliezer Ben Yehuda scolded her. And he said to her, even when you're terrified and you're screaming, scream in Hebrew, be scared in Hebrew. And you're starting to understand a little bit of the mentality of Eliezer Ben Yehuda. Now their son, Itamar, when he was born, did not start talking until he was 4 years old. My daughter, Halel, is 16 months old. She's talking words, not more than that, words, but you don't talk till you're close to 4 years old. That's a long time, and people are starting to ask, is he all right? Is he okay? And one night, Dvorah is singing a lullaby song to Itamar, and she was singing it in Russian. And Eliezer was out of the house, so she thought it was okay. But Eliezer suddenly, he comes home, he's surprised when he heard her singing a lullaby in Russian. He got furious, he started yelling, he started screaming. He was actually about to hit her, apparently. And Itamar saw this and he yells, Abba! And everybody froze. It was his first word. And it was the first time someone said Abba. And since then we have Abba. And my daughter calls me, what is it, over 100 years later, Abba, 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 also at 3 in the morning. But I mean, these are some of the stories and the mentality over here of Eliezer Ben Yehuda. How do you bring Hebrew or modernize Hebrew into society once again? So there's a variety of ways of doing it, and one of the ways is via a newspaper, and then you sell it for cheap, which is what he did for like half a grush. Eliezer Ben Yehuda basically created newspapers called Hatzvi or Chavatzelet, and it's all in Hebrew, and you write everything in the newspaper. News, all right, you write articles on a variety of things, opinion articles. We're going to see a little bit how his wife Chemda wrote about fashion, all in Hebrew. You can write recipes in Hebrew. You can write lists of things in Hebrew. Once again, everything in Hebrew, and this was Eliezer Ben Yehuda's way of making Hebrew mungash, making it something that is accessible to everybody. And we're talking about the school that Eliezer Ben Yehuda and Rishon Lezion being the first school where Hebrew was taught. The ripple effect was amazing, because if we're talking about Rishon Lezion being brought onto the land at the beginning, the land bought and being created in 1882, by the 1890s, when we already have many small towns that were created by the members of the first wave of immigration, the first aliyah, that came through the port of Jaffa, they are teaching in Hebrew. This is not a given. It's not like today, where in Israel, of course, you'll speak Hebrew, or in countries, like England, US, or wherever you're from, of course, you're not going to teach all day in Hebrew, but you will have some kind of Hebrew class. Back then, this was not a given, and all the way through until 1914, when the Technion, back then called the Technikum, but the Technion, the Israeli version of MIT, is being built in Haifa, and there's a big argument. It's called Milchemet HaSafot, the war of the languages. What language are we going to teach in? And many people were saying, of course, we'll teach in German. And Eliezer Ben Yehuda and many others pushed, no, we're going to teach in Hebrew. And for the first time in university, on an academic level, Hebrew is being taught, and this is only, 30 years after Eliezer Ben Yehuda arrives over here to the land of Israel and starts really pushing for this to happen. Now, I promised you that we'd be able to see the school, the first school, right? Before we saw, let's stand over here on the porch, we saw the classroom, all right? Now, the classroom was in a room that was created special to put the different artifacts inside, but the real classroom was inside this building over here. It's on the street right outside of the museum. We look to the right, we look to the left, we see the town of Rishon Lezion today. All right, this is what the street looks like. And over here we have the school. It's called Chaviv, all right, meaning friendly, Chaviv school. And they're refurbishing it, and the plan is to open it up once again soon to be used. So that's where the real classroom was inside. We weren't in there before. We were in a different area across the street where we are right now. And if we're talking about school, let's turn a little bit. Whoops. See, that's the thing with virtual. You sort of lose your footing a little bit. I've fallen off ladders in virtual. I've missed entrances. So let's try to make our way into here. I'm sorry if I'm making you a little dizzy. And now we've popped into this room over here. And let's join a kid in school. Backpack, anybody? You know those pictures that we take when you go to first day of school, be it first grade, be it fourth grade or whatnot, and you're standing over there, you're doing like this, first grade or fourth grade, you see this backpack, or sometimes, the kid is this big and the backpack is like this big. So this is their backpack, this leather bag over here. This is what they put things inside in the middle. Math class, anybody? We can see how they played over here with the beads. I was never good at it, which is why I'm sitting in front of here talking to you. History, I love history. Never got into the math part of things, but each to their own. But the main thing that I wanted to point out, and let's see if I can take one step to the right, and nope, I can't. So let's zoom in, is this. Oh, now we get a good view of it. Take a look at that. This is a chalkboard. Every kid came with the chalkboard to class. Okay, he put it in his backpack. He or she would write words. They're learning these words for the first time. These words will be taught. They're going to come back home. They're going to say, Mom, Dad, Abba, Ima. These are the 2-3 new words that I learned. And they're going to say it to different people. And this is a ripple effect that they continued with. So, but we're not in a vacuum. Okay, Eliezer Ben Yehuda is not the only great Hebrew mind over here at this time. And let's meet some of the other great Hebrew minds and very well-known personalities that were here at the time. And let's hear their opinion regarding Eliezer Ben Yehuda. Let's go to this first figure over here. Now, we already know him. His name is Theodor Herzl. And as we come up to Theodor Herzl over here, we're going to do a little dance in the room because I'm trying to position myself. And here we go. And let's zoom in and see what Theodor Herzl had to say about Eliezer Ben Yehuda. Eliezer Ben Yehuda, I'll give you a little background. He was a controversial figure. We already mentioned before, the ultra-Orthodox weren't a fan of his because he was secularizing, Chilun in Hebrew, secularizing the Hebrew language. Theodor Herzl met Eliezer Ben Yehuda, and Theodor Herzl's our political visionary. He will visit Eliezer Ben Yehuda, and his one visit to us in 1898. Theodor Herzl is coming to speak to throughout the last 10 years of his life, he spoke to different political leaders trying to create a state for the Jewish people. The German Kaiser Wilhelm II is visiting here in 1898. Herzl comes here special to speak to him, and along the way, he's going to visit Eliezer Ben Yehuda. And what is his impression? I'll read it in Hebrew and simultaneously translate it to English. Bikirani ha'itona'i Ben Yehuda miYerushalayim. The journalist Ben Yehuda from Jerusalem visited me. Listen to the cynicism a little bit over here. Yehudi katan ve'admoni, a small and red-headed Jew, Mina Mizrach, hu ma'arich bediburo. He's from the east and he talks a lot. ונראה כאילו יש לו איזו מחשבה מוסתרת, is supposed to say, and it looks as if he has some kind of like secret thought in the background. So that's Theodore Herzl's opinion, not very positive opinion of Eliezer Ben Yehuda. We can meet Shai Agnon. Shai Agnon, I mentioned him in the previous tour of Tel Aviv, whether you're with me or not. Shai Agnon is one of the renowned figures in Israeli literature and culture, and he is going to immigrate to Israel in part of the second wave of Aliyah in 1908, and he is going to win the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1966. And he was also involved in, writing new words and things like that. And what is Shai Agnon going to write about, say about Eliezer Ben Yehuda? He takaf et hamilim shechidesh Ben Yehuda. He attacked the words that Ben Yehuda wrote. Now, why? Why was Shai Agnon so upset at Eliezer Ben Yehuda? He was upset at him because of his methods. Like what words? Kmo mivreshet, which means a brush. She'en lem yesod v'shorish b'lshon hakodesh. It has no base in the holy language. So when you come up with new words, it needs to have some kind of base, in the holy Hebrew. You can't come up, just, with brush, with mivreshet, without it really having a good base. V'ligleg al kach sheben Yehuda kara lemirkachat perot riba. And he made fun of Ben Yehuda that he called jelly or jam riba. It had a different word. Shai Agnon did not connect it. I can tell you today that when I make, like a good American, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I say, can I please have chemat botnim, which is peanut butter, and riba. So the word caught. Shai Agnon did not agree with it at the time. Shai Agnon said about Eliezer Ben Yehuda, he said, Beta charoshet lemilim, katav Ben Yehuda. He called him a words factory, just shooting out lots of words, and Shai Agnon did not like Eliezer Ben Yehuda's style very much. And it's interesting when you read about what different people said. We can talk, for example, about Echad Ha'am over here, who very much believed in if you want to call it a spiritual Jewish culture. And he said about Eliezer Ben Yehuda, no. Im ka'ele yu dovrei ivritecha lehaba. If these are going to be these kinds of your Hebrew speakers in the past, Adoni Ben Yehuda motav shelo yidabru haklal. Mr. Ben Yehuda, if these are the words, better not to speak it at all. Look, all that being said, a lot of times when you have a genius or someone who has a new idea, a groundbreaking idea, there's a lot of opposition, but that's part of it. You need to go against his opposition. You need to jump into the water like a Nachshon ben Aminadav, like the first person who jumped into the Red Sea. According to the book of Exodus, you need to push your way through, and that is exactly what Eliezer Ben Yehuda did. Also, Chaim Nachman Bialik was the national poet of the land of Israel. He also was not a big fan of Eliezer Ben Yehuda, and looking at the words that he created, sort of like a words factory. And let's start taking a look at some of the words that Eliezer Ben Yehuda came up with. And if this was really interactive, what I would do is I would ask you, how many words, in your opinion, did Eliezer Ben Yehuda, with the help of, at the end of the day, it was really his second wife, Chemda, how many new words did he come up with? And you'd throw out different numbers and whatnot. The answer is roughly 300. That's it. Honestly, Agnon and Bialik came out with more new words than Eliezer Ben Yehuda did at the end of the day. But Eliezer Ben Yehuda created this idea of modernizing it to be used on a daily basis. And despite these different, very monumental figures being against his style, the words were used, the Hebrew was spoken, it was implemented, and from there advanced that much more with so many more new words by many other people created because of Eliezer Ben Yehuda in all the different walks of life in the land of Israel. So let's start taking a look. We're going to start looking at some of the words that Eliezer Ben Yehuda came up with. We can take a look at, for example, at tayas, a pilot, yetzu v'yevu, input and output. I'm saying these words because these are words that we use all the time. They did not exist before. Reka means a background. Te'una means an accident. Tkuva means a reaction. These are words. Think about how much we use these words just in a sentence all the time. And he, brought these words to be part of the modernization. What we're going to do now is let us go and see some of the other words that Eliezer Ben Yehuda created. And what we're going to do is we're going to enter the stable room over here. And when we enter the stable room over here, I'm not going to talk so much about the stables, but let's talk about words that are connected to transportation. Again, these are words that we use all the time. We'll take a look at this picture over here. This is a picture of Rishon Lezion, again, in its beginnings, when its synagogue was built a few years after it was created. And it's over here that we have the central bus station, or the central area where horses would come, or donkeys that would bring you from place to place, or vehicles that would take you from place to place. And if you want to say, like, I want to go from one place to the next, Eliezer Ben Yehuda is going to come up with words that are going to teach you, regarding going from one place to the next. So we're opening up these words now that Eliezer Ben Yehuda wrote about transportation. And again, these are words that we use all the time. Let's take a look. We can see, for example, on the right side, darkon, okay, a passport, sira, a boat, madrigot, steps. How much do we use these on a daily basis? On the left side, we can see ramzor, traffic light, aviron, an airplane. And these are words that we're taught. It says on top, it says, Misrad HaChinuch ve'atarbut, Mivtza Hanchalat HaLashon La'am. The Ministry of Education and Culture, the project of teaching the people Hebrew. The words are created by Eliezer Ben Yehuda, but this is a page that was created in the 1950s because of all the tremendous amount, the wave of new immigrants, Olim Chadashim, to the land of Israel, and they're teaching them these words. So now that we saw those words, let's move back a little bit, and let's see something. Let's take a look at something fun. In order to do that, let's move forward, and here we go. Let's open up this piece over here. And this piece over here, we're talking about transportation. In Hebrew, we are talking about the train, rakevet in Hebrew. Today, when we drive to Jerusalem, we have the new train, or it started running in 2020, if I remember correctly, Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in 28 minutes. Oh, but if we go back to 1892, the train that can make it to Jerusalem in 3 hours is like a huge deal. Now we don't need to travel for like a whole day or even an overnight. 1892, this picture over here that we can see is the arrival of the first train to Jerusalem from Jaffa in 1892. Now, what I like to take a look at a lot of times are some of the details, the telltale details in the picture that tells you the story of the time. First of all, take a look at the flags on the right side of the building. Turkish flags, right? The Turks are ruling over here. If you know the first station, Mitchamet Tachana in Jerusalem, where we go out to eat and for cultural events back then, that's this over here. All right, if you run along the tracks today, these are at least part of these tracks over here. And look in the background, what do you see? The windmill. Right? The windmill was built back in 1860, but that's a whole other tour. It's just cool. Look, but Eliezer Ben Yehuda writes like this. On the third sentence from on top, he writes in Hebrew, where you see it says Bet Yud, Ben Yehuda, V'ulai od yoter tov rakevet, v'hu shayera shel rechev shel markevot. Eliezer Ben Yehuda is saying, wait, we have this train. What should we call it? And there's different ideas, maybe this, maybe that. And he says, you know what? One car of a train is called a rechev. So let's call it lots of cars. Rechev, rakevet. And that's how we have the word today, rakevet, which is a train. And now what we're going to do is, and now that we spoke a little bit about these words over here, let's see how we instill other words to people. When the members of Rishon Lezion make Aliyah, the 17 families make Aliyah to the land of Israel in 1882, they have a vision and they have a dream. Their dream is to leave behind whatever they worked in back in Europe, and now we're working the land. But there's a bit of a problem. You got to the field and your shoe gets ripped. You need the person that fixes your shoes, right? You left family back in Europe and you're here in Israel, you need the mailman to bring your mail. So what ends up happening is most of the day they'll work in the fields, but 2 or 3 hours during the day they will work in their jobs that they did back home because you need it for the upkeep of different things. So for example, you need the medic over here. You need medicines, you need the pharmacy. So you have the pharmacist, right? You have the shoemaker over here, right? Sandlar in Hebrew, you'll have the shoemaker. And you have all these different jobs that'll help people. Oh, by the way, on a picture, of course, you have your wedding, bar bat mitzvah. So you're going to be doing that. All these people working in these different jobs. And what will happen is, again, same thing. In the 1950s, the Ministry of Education and Culture will come up with all of these words that were created by Eliezer Ben Yehuda to teach the masses of the Olim Chadashim, of the new immigrants that are moving to Israel. Need the mailman? You want your mail from your family in Europe, right? So if that's the case, let's open up the words over here that are in Hebrew, and let's take a look. Again, these are words that, of course, we know them. Michtav, letter, misparaim, scissors. We can talk about madaf, shelf, and different kinds of telephones on the bottom. It was not a given, right? Which is pretty amazing. By the way, this mailman that we can see, let's take a look at him over here. He's like Mr. Information. In Israel, we call it 144. I think in the US it's 411. Mr. Information, why? Because a lot of letters you wouldn't necessarily close in an envelope, but it was open. It was a postcard. So he'd read it, even if he wasn't supposed to. You need information? You want to know what's going on? Speak to the mailman. Don't worry. He is going to know. Fashion. We all love fashion. So let's take a look right over here at the fashion side. Now, here we go. Chemda Ben Yehuda, Eliezer Ben Yehuda's wife, they're running the newspaper, right? Her and her husband Eliezer, they have Tzvi and Chavatzelet. She wants to teach, through the pages of the newspaper, fashion in Hebrew. So she's going to write articles about fashion in Hebrew, and we can see a few of these examples. For example, Shachor ze nechama, black is condolences, and she writes this when Theodor Herzl passes away. She wrote about the importance of wearing black, and she's going to write this in Hebrew in order for people to understand. She's teaching fashion in Hebrew. By the way, she takes the word moda, which is used for fashion, and she creates the word ofna for fashion that is going to be used. So, you know, all these different things that, again, we'll always take for given, and they're going to be created. We want to get dressed in the morning, all right? I want to dress my kids. They want to tell me what they want to wear. We want to get dressed to go out and have a good time. You're telling people what you want to wear. We need words. We can talk about simla, a dress. Now, don't get me into the difference between simla chatzait, between a dress and different kinds of dresses, because over there I get a little bit lost. But we can have churtza, which is a shirt. We can have an aniva, which is a tie. Chagora, which is a belt. Akevim, high heels. All Eliezer Ben Yehuda being taught, again, close in the 1950s. But words written by Eliezer Ben Yehuda way before. The Hebrew language, we have a people, we have a nation, we have a place, we have a language, we need an anthem. I want to introduce you to a man whose name is Naftali Herz Imber. We don't have a picture of him right now, but this is the room that's in his memory. And Naftali Herz Imber is going to be a man who's going to grow up in Europe and in Romania in the 1870s, 1877 to be exact. He's going to write a song that is called Tikvatenu, Our Hope. Might sound familiar. The national anthem in Israel is called Hatikva, the Hope. He's going to make his way to the land of Israel in the following years, and he's going to actually spend a couple years in Rishon Lezion in the 1880s. And if he starts writing his song Tikvatenu in Romania in 1877, as he's traveling around the land of Israel over the next few years in the 1880s, he's going to add new sections, new paragraphs to the song. So this song over here, called Tikvatenu, actually has 9 paragraphs. You might be saying, wait a minute, the national anthem has 2 paragraphs. And I'll say, you're right, because this is the first draft. He is going to publish it when he's in Rishon Lezion in 1886 in a book that's called Barkai. He's also going to publish it in Eliezer Ben Yehuda's newspaper called Hatzvi in 1886. And the song catches on very much. Now, what will happen later is if we pop over to over here, if you're saying, wait, Ami, but that's a little different than the national anthem we have today, then I'll say you're right. Here is Hatikva that we have today. Hatikva today, our national anthem today, is cut down from 9 paragraphs to 2 paragraphs. I've got to be honest with you, I can't imagine every time that we'd sing Hatikva, the national anthem, you'd go through 9 different paragraphs. Imagine at the beginning of a sports game, we're all standing, it'd be a long time. So he cut it down to 2. They're also a little bit different. If we look at Hatikva, there's also some differences. Even in the 2 paragraphs that we use from the version of Naftali Herz Imber, he writes, there's Hatikva Noshana, the old hope, Lashuv le'eretz avotenu, to come back to the land of our forefathers, Le'ir ba David Chana, to the city where David parked, where he was located, which is Jerusalem. It was changed, and it says basically like this, Hatikva mishnot alpaim, The hope is 2,000 years old. Liot am chofshi be'artzenu, to be a free people in our land. Eretz Tzion v'Yerushalayim, the land of Zion and Jerusalem. So these are some of the differences. Where's the melody from? So this is where it gets really fun. The melody is a Romanian folk song, and there was a new immigrant in Rishon Lezion. His name was Shmuel Kohn. That's not him over here in the picture. Yes, Shmuel Kohn. And he loves this song, Hatikva. And he started singing it with the tune of a Romanian folk song. And back in the 1880s, and that's how it goes together. I want you to listen to this Romanian folk song with the tune from Hatikva, or let's be more exact, this Romanian folk song that Hatikva gets its tune from. So here we go.
Electricitate, căi ferate și vapor nu erau încă aflate, mergeau toate fără zor. Când bătrânii erau moi și-și mânau carul cu boi, ăștia, 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 pe căi ferate, prin vagoane îndesate, scot cu capetele sparte, nemâncați și de derați. De aceea nu nevoi, își bănau carul cu boi, ăștia, 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 ăștia.
So I think we get the idea. And what I'd like to do now is let's go back now. To Eliezer Ben Yehuda, to the rooms that are specifically about him, and let's sum up his life. In 1922, Eliezer Ben Yehuda passed away, and we can see the announcement, the obituary regarding his passing, which says, Evel kaved be'eretz Yisrael, Eliezer Ben Yehuda ineno. A very heavy mourning in the land of Israel. Eliezer Ben Yehuda is gone. Eliezer Ben Yehuda, he modernized Hebrew. He was the first one who came up with the idea of making Hebrew a daily language and connecting it between the Jewish people, the Jewish nation, they're returning to the land, and as the Hebrew language being a part of it. And that was his tremendous idea, and that is what really turns him into one of the more key figures over here, and not just the revival of the Hebrew language, but the revival of the Jewish people, modern-day Zionism over here in the land of Israel. He created a newspaper so that people can, in order to connect the people to it that much more, to make the language tangible to them. He brought it to schools and had people teach Ivrit be'Ivrit, Hebrew in Hebrew. He created what's called the Vad HaLashon, the Hebrew Committee, which later will turn into what we have today, which is the Academia for Hebrew. We'll come up over here with new words. He came up with a milon, a dictionary, that is the first word that he taught in Hebrew, that he came up with in Hebrew, a milon, a dictionary, which is called the Ben Yehuda Dictionary. And with this, Eliezer Ben Yehuda came up with this breakthrough idea, or he made it tangible and it's possible that his breakthrough idea of the Hebrew language being a central part of the idea of the Jewish people and the nation coming back to the land, it all being one together. Eliezer Ben Yehuda said the following, and I'll read it in Hebrew and translate it to English. Bechol davar chadash, bechol psi'a hayoter ktana al derech kol kidma. And every new thing, and every little step that you take when you're creating something new, tzarich sheimatzeh eze nachshon sheikpotz el toch hayam. You need a nachshon to jump into the water, named after Nachshon ben Aminadav, who was the first to jump into the Red Sea in the book of Exodus and the parting of the sea. Sheimatzeh eze nachshon sheikpotz el toch hayam be'ofen she'i efshar lo yoter lachzor bo. Jump into the sea in a way that he cannot go back. Just some of my favorite, my words that I really connect to, that he taught is adiv, being courteous, iton, a newspaper, buba is a dal, chavita is an omelet, glida, ice cream, who doesn't love that? Zehut, identity, very central part of our life, tatzpit, a viewpoint, or a lookout. And if we're talking about words and we're talking about Eliezer Ben Yehuda, we can't not finish with the song that was written about Eliezer Ben Yehuda by Aaron London and the melody by Mati Kaspi, which I'll just read a little bit in English and then we'll hear the song in Hebrew in order to finish. Like the prophets devoted to God, or to Shem, which is a noun, he was devoted to adjectives, verbs and nouns. And at midnight, oil lamp on his desk would write mountains and mountains of beautiful, fluent words. Eliezer, when will you go to sleep? Your back is so bent. And the Hebrew language that waited for thousands of years will wait for you until sunrise. And the chorus, Eliezer Ben Yehuda, such a lovely Jew. Words, words, such many words he invented from his bright.
כמו הנביאים הקנאים לשם, הוא כינר לפועל ולתואר ולשם, ובחצות הששית בחלונות, היה רושם במילונות תילי תילים, מילים יפות, מילים עפות, מתגלגלות מן הלשון. אליעזר, מתי תשכב לישון? הן קומתך כמעט 2000 שחר, והעברית אשר חיכתה 2000 היא תמתין לך עד בוא השחר.
אליעזר בן יהודה, יהודי מבדע, מילים מילים, מילים מילים, הוא בדע עם מוחו הקוטע. אם נמה העברית 2000, נו אז מה הבה נעירנה ונמציא את היוזמה, את המגהים.
So thank you very much. Thank you to Chava Albersh and Mati Kaspi for joining us to sing Eliezer Ben Yehuda. It's been a pleasure. If you have any questions, you are more than welcome to email me. Have a wonderful evening.